Thank you so much for being here at the TAM Alumni panel of summer 2023. We organize these panels 3 times a year. So we do one in person in the fall, one in person in the spring at UNC, and then we've done the summer panels online for a while now. I used to go to DC and do them in person there, but now they seem to work well online, and some people are on vacation, so they can still Zoom in, which is good. So thanks for taking some time out of your July for this. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Sarah, and I've worked with TAM for 21 years this month. And it's just a wonderful program and a wonderful bunch of people. And anytime I get to interact with the grads, it's such a pleasure. And we're really so lucky. We have 3 with us right now. And we're so lucky to have them stay engaged with the program and give back to the program with all of their expertise and enthusiasm. And thank you so much, Philip and Abby, for being with us. It's really great. I work mostly with TAM students, but also, of course, with people interested in doing TAM. So looking at it for future goals, and then with a little bit with the undergrads too, with some pre-professional programming, because we have that Euro major in the center as well. So anytime you want to talk to me, whether you're a grad, a student, a thinking about it person, a maybe for TAM, I am happy to talk to you. And so are our grads. So these grads in general, the TAM people, we have about 400 now, 420 with the new group. TAM is 25 years old this year, and our cohorts are small. So what's really been remarkable over the years is that TAM students and grads bring this sort of adventure tolerance into the program, and the way the program is structured really invites people with a high level of adventure tolerance and an interest in doing things a little bit differently, and really, living their studies and getting to be both in the US and overseas. So these people are fascinating to track and learn from, because I notice over time a lot of them are not only doing fascinating things in their careers, as the TAM grads who are here can attest to, but also in their personal and private lives, they're doing equally really interesting things. So it's just a pleasure to interact with them and learn from them and hear from them. If you want to read more, we do have a TAM blog. Maybe Kayla, you'll put that link in the chat from the TAM website, the news and events. So I just put up some bios of what TAM students, 4 of them, are doing this summer. And then over the years, if you scroll down, you can see some accounts of what TAM grads are doing in different fields. We profiled some who work, for instance, for the federal government, some who work in journalism. And so you can find out a lot about our TAM grads there. And then always, if you're interested in interacting with some that you encounter on a Zoom, on a webinar, or in person, thank you, Kayla, they're happy to follow up with you and answer questions. So I was hoping that today we would hear from the grads themselves, and we'll start with Philip Lind, who is a grad from 2022. And you'll notice, since Abby is a grad from 2021, their stories do have a COVID impact to them. So their route through the program was not as traditional as we would have hoped, but they are recent grads and they are amazing, as are all our grads. And so I think it's definitely worthwhile to hear from them. And if we don't get Mario on the line, I'm going to impose on Brett, who's just graduated in May, to pitch hit and unexpectedly give his testimony. So you still get to hear from 3 grads. All right, Brett. So I would love it if we could hear from Philip. I asked him just to tell us a little bit about his time in TAM and what he's been doing since. And he was one of our double degree seekers, so both seeking and receiving the UNC MA in political science, concentration European governance, and the MA degree from Gothenburg University. And Philip, I should say, is Swedish. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. Sorry if my connection might be a bit unstable, but I'm currently on the highway in Sweden, so just trying to make the most out of it. But yeah, I started TAM in 2020 and did the dual program with Gothenburg University. Even though I never made it to the US and UNC during my year because of COVID, I started in the middle of it, basically. I really enjoyed the program and I learned a lot. During TAM, I did an internship with the American Chamber of Commerce in Sweden for about 1.5 years. And after finishing TAM, I started working in politics right after graduation, basically, and have continued in politics since. So my first job was as an election coordinator in my home county of Jönköping for the Christian Democrats. And I did that for about 5 months, just like planning and basically doing campaigning work in the whole county. About 110,000 people live in Jönköping County, so quite a big district. And after that job, I started working in Stockholm, which I'm currently working. And I am now the Secretary General of the political youth organization of the Christian Democrats. And we have about 4,000 to 5,000 members all around Sweden. And basically whole Sweden has KDU, which we are called present, which is fun. But we're obviously trying to expand our reach. The tasks are mainly administrative and organizational, but I'm also media responsible. So I reach out to journalists, try to sell articles for them, try to get the politicians into radio or TV, for example. And a day can vary a lot, everything from starting the day of answering emails to trying to get articles published. Some crisis management, but not too often, thankfully, and also planning for the upcoming EU election, and I also help planning national events. I am obviously very much looking forward to the EU election after the whole TAM experience and trying to really do things in practice from what we learn and try to shape a political platform, be very flexible. And I feel that TAM absolutely prepared me well for that, for having a job in politics and just managing a lot of different information, learning things quickly and well, while at the same time prioritizing what to do next. But yeah, as Sarah said earlier, if any one of you have any questions, feel free to contact Sarah and she can send you my email, and I'd be happy to help out.
Can you tell us a little bit about your internship experience as well?
Yeah, so I started during the winter break of between my first and second semester with the chamber. Got in contact with the chamber through another TAM grad, Gary Workman. I don't think he's with the US chamber anymore, but he helped me out to get in contact with them, and my responsibilities were quite varied because they were in Stockholm. I was in my hometown, so everything was online. But it was trying to help them with planning online events, for example, trying to write a report, for example. It was very, very different task, but a great experience. And for you guys who will start TAM, I would recommend trying to get an internship during your year, because it has helped me a lot trying to find a job afterwards.
Yeah, it was really great how you worked through Garrett Workman, one of our grads, and then you also sort of set the ground because Imka and now Niels have had that internship after you, and now the chamber there wants to partner with us so that 1 or 2 students in TAM could just automatically go into that internship, which is really kind of the dream. So thank you for being the trailblazer there. We have Mario with us, so let's pass it to Mario. Thank you for joining. He's in California, as I understand it, and is part of the class, TAM class of 2016, so was not impacted by COVID. Hi, Philip. Thanks for coming back. We're going to loop back to you after Mario. And Mario was one of 3 students who was the first ever to participate in the German studies track of the program, and went from Chapel Hill, the semester at Chapel Hill, to Ankara in Turkey, and then did the final year in Berlin, and has also since then helped us with an alumni event focused on immigration that we did with another grad in Greece who is Greek. And that was just such a cool event because it turned out that some of the work that the more senior grad had been doing, had impacted Mario when he weren't you interning in Brussels? And there had been some overlap even though they didn't know each other. So that was really cool. And I should have said before, Philip, Mario, and Abby have done alumni events for us already in the past. So I thought that was a really successful one that you did with Celianos. So yeah, we're going to hear from Mario now, and be thinking of questions that you want to ask each of these grads at the end.
Thank you, everyone. So yeah, I did the TAM program. I did the 3rd track, the German Turkish studies track back in 2014. And I had a very interesting journey getting there because the track was initially independent. It was just the Middle Eastern Technical University in Ankara and the Humboldt University in Berlin. And I had applied the year before, but I was basically forced to defer a year. And then it wasn't until UNC did the collaboration that I was able to actually do the program. And the reason for that was that if you know the DACA program for undocumented students, I'm under that program. So as soon as I heard that there was this international program, I applied because I studied international relations in undergrad. And, being undocumented, I hardly got any international opportunities or to do anything like that. So I applied, and then the immigration services basically denied my travel permit on the day that I was supposed to travel to my program in 2013. So I was forced to defer. It was either I go study, but I basically deport myself, or wait and then figure it out. So I decided to wait and figure it out. And that's when UNC started doing collaboration. And it was perfect because basically all I needed was a letter from a US institution to sponsor my travel. So for some reason, they don't let you go to a foreign university, but if it's connected to a US university, it's fine. So even though, the component is supposed to be educational travel, so it didn't make sense to me, but I was really happy that it happened because I got to attend UNC. So I did my first semester at Chapel Hill. I drove across the country from California, got to do 1 semester there, and then went to Ankara with a couple of my classmates. And that was a very interesting experience, just being in so many countries at once and studying in Ankara. And the reason why I decided to study the program was because I studied a German minor in college, and I learned about the Turkish experience in Germany. So I was really interested about that component of migration, of how Turks lived in Germany, and it seemed very similar to the experience of Mexicans in the US, how a lot of them came for labor, and how there's these issues of or issues of integration and assimilation and being from like a different culture. So all of that was like really fascinating to me. And that's why I decided to study the tribe. And while I was in Turkey, I applied for an internship at the United Nations Development Program. So I was able to do a summer internship at their regional hub in Istanbul. And I was working with the law, rights, and health team addressing HIV issues in the region. And I mainly helped work on international development project proposal to fund NGOs in Eastern Europe for $500,000, which was funded by USAID. And then after that, I went to Berlin, to Humboldt, and it was a really great experience because when I was at UNC, I had applied for a scholarship, the DAAD, the Deutscher Akademischer Austauschdienst, which basically pays you to like live in Germany and give you like a really nice stipend. So that was really nice because it made my experience in Germany very comfortable, and I got to live in a pretty cool part of town. I got lucky. I found like a small studio in like a cool area of town, and I was paying like 500 euros, but I had my scholarship. So I was only really paying like 300 something euros. Yeah, I got to do the program and take some courses there. And I did one semester, and then I was accepted into a fellowship at the European Parliament with a member of the European Parliament from Romania. And I was able to intern in Brussels and help her out with her work on the subcommittee on human rights, the committee on employment, and other international issues. At the time, the refugee crisis was happening for a year already. So there was a lot of discussions about refugee integration, how to respond to like the issues of refugees coming to the European Union and trafficking issues. So it was a very interesting time to be there. I remember, when seeing the response in Turkey, how a lot of people were migrating and being able to see that firsthand, like in Ankara, how you see like refugees going through these migration points. Like I visited Izmir and seeing how there's so many folks congregating there to like migrate. And then also being in Germany and seeing kind of like the response by German society to like accept them into the EU, and then being in Brussels to see like the policy response, and then seeing how in some locations like Erdogan, the Turkish president, would come and they would just shut everything down. And I used to live next to the European Commission, so I would walk, home, and when Erdogan was visiting, like I had to take a different route because there was so much security, and they were discussing these topics of how to address the refugee situation. So it's very interesting to get that experience on the ground, not only like lived experience, but also educational, and then seeing it at the policy level, how it plays out. I think it was like a really unique experience that I got to attend, and yeah, I was very fortunate. And then after graduation, because this was right before Trump was going to be elected, I decided to help out by applying to jobs in deportation defense. So I've been doing that basically since like 2017, just working in deportation defense issues in California and helping folks who are detained by immigration fight their cases and get released from detention facilities and ICE. So yeah, I think that's kind of like a broad summary.
Thank you so much, Mario. And you worked in COVID to help de-densify detention centers, right?
Yeah, during COVID. So I'd been working like 3-4 years before COVID in certain detention facilities. And so I helped lead a lot of like data tracking efforts. Basically, when we provide legal services, how to track all that information in a very systematic way. because prior to that, it was just like really messy. It was all like handwritten intakes that would get lost. So I helped implement like a database system. And then we used that database system to basically identify who was detained during COVID from all the information we had gathered from the years prior. And then we collected all that information and provided it to the lawyers leading a class action lawsuit, Cepeda Rivas. And so basically, at the time I was teaching an internship at UC Davis called Research Resist Abolish Eyes. And I taught a bunch of interns how to do like data analysis, how to read legal intakes, taught them about immigration issues. And so when COVID happened, I had this team of like 15 interns. And because their database is kind of old, a lot of manual labor was required to pull like the case info and like the scanned intakes. But with a team of 15 UC Davis students, we pulled all that info and then sent it to class council, and they were able to implement like this lawsuit that ultimately depopulated 2 facilities to like 25% of their capacity, which was really like unheard of because since I started working, the facility is in Bakersfield, California, which is middle of nowhere, has capacity for 400 people. It was always constantly full.
Yeah.
But then after that lawsuit, the population was reduced to like less than 100, which was really great for like abolitionist efforts. But yeah, we still didn't manage to really shut it down.
Well, thank you. It's really inspiring to hear, how your personal story and then your time in TAM with these different locations and experiences and exposures informs, your work and what you've done along the way. And you are going to get the opportunity to go back overseas, right?
Yeah. So once Trump was elected, like he tried to get rid of the DACA program. And part of it was like the travel abroad component.
Right.
So since like 2017, like no one was able to travel. And it wasn't until like basically until Biden got elected that they had to sue basically to get that component back. So I tried to travel last year. I was accepted into a summer program in Greece. Oh, and then Humboldt too. I got into a winter program. And I had paid for everything, like $1,500 to attend. But yeah, they didn't like approve my application because I was also trying to go back to Mexico to like see my grandpa. So they approved my component to travel to see my grandpa, but not like for me to go to Europe. So I guess it's like but now I got accepted into a fellowship for undocumented professionals. And I'm trying to go for 4 months. I requested 4 months to be able to go to Colombia, Mexico, and I'm trying to go back to Europe. So hopefully Humboldt and Greece.
Awesome.
Or Berlin and Greece.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And you might do some speaking in Berlin.
Yeah, I asked if I could do like a guest lecture like at the end of May, around May.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mario. We will probably have more questions for you in a minute, but I'd like to pass to Abby now. Abby Lance is one of our grads from 2021 who also pursued the UNC degree and the Gothenburg University degree. And she did some very cool internship work, and I will let her tell you about it. And is now one of the Presidential Management Fellows and is coming to us from Rome now. Over to you, Abby.
Hi, guys. So, I was in TAM in 2021. So wildly, that was 2 years ago. Can't believe it. My first year I was in Chapel Hill. My second year I was in Chicago most of the time because of COVID. So I never really get to do a ton of travel, but I did get to do a bunch of travel this year through the, like Sarah said, the Presidential Management Fellows program. So I can talk a lot about that because that's kind of been my professional bounce after, leaving TAM so far, although I'll convert to a full-time State Department position in September. I spent the first 6 months of this year in Mexico City and then the next 6 months in Rome. It's been fantastic. Right now I'm working as a political economic officer at Embassy Vatican. So the US Embassy to the Holy See, which I did not know existed, you might not know exists, which is one of the 3 embassies that we have here in Rome. So we have the embassy to Italy, the embassy to the Vatican, and then the embassy to the Rome offices of international organizations. We call it the US-UN embassy. And so mostly they talk to like the World Food Program, for example, and the FAO. So it's been a great couple months here. And in Mexico, I was a staff assistant under Ambassador Ken Salazar. So essentially doing a ton of logistics and kind of like being a really important guy's second brain and what does he need to remember and somebody needs to hold his hat and all that kind of stuff. And then before that, when I was in TAM, honestly, I feel like I can't remember all the internships I did. Like, I don't know, it's just been so long, but I know I did a very long unpaid virtual internship with USAID's Bureau for Conflict Prevention and Stabilization, so CPS. And then I ended up actually going on as a PMF. So PMF is confusing, but the way it works is you have a home office that's like your office for 2 years, and then you go to rotations from that office, and that can be with any federal agency. So my home office right now is the Bureau of Conflict Stabilization Operations, which sounds a lot like what that internship was because it's the State Department's sister office to that office at USAID. So I knew for a long time I was really interested in atrocity prevention and conflict stabilization and, a lot of issues related to how do you prevent a country from becoming more violent? How do you kind of deal with peace negotiations, all that kind of stuff? And it's been really interesting, understanding how to work for the federal government, which I had done a ton of other internships in my career, everything from local government to interning for a senator to interning for a nonprofit and a foundation and like kind of all these different levels of like the public sphere, right? But I'd never done a federal internship. So it's like, okay, besides the state or the Senate, it's time to try out working for an agency. And so far, so good. You definitely feel like you're more in the middle of things, but all the bureaucracy is also true. And so I'm happy to talk to anyone who's interested in potentially, looking into a federal career. It's not easy to get in without some kind of an on-ramp. So, PMF is a good on-ramp. Peace Corps is a good on-ramp. But once you're in, it's a good place to be. It's a lot easier to move around than I thought it was going to be. So I thought, if you get hired by the Department of Agriculture, you can't go then work for the State Department. It's not true. Once you're in, you're kind of in. So you can jump around a lot. So in September, I'll convert, which basically just means I'll stop being a temporary employee and I'll become a full-fledged civil servant in my home bureau at the Conflict of Stabilization Operations. We had a TAM event last fall, Sarah, where people came in and listened to a bunch of people from my bureau talk about their jobs. And it's been great. There's a lot of perks to working in my bureau. I have almost full telework. I have really great bosses. There's a lot of opportunity to go abroad on short stints that are called TDYs or temporary deployments. So far it's really worked for me, both professionally and personally, but you never know, I might end up doing something else in a couple of years. So that's kind of my intro spiel. Any other questions or anything else I should talk about, Sarah?
Well, thank you so much, Abby. I know I was reflecting back to that session, that phenomenal session you set up in DC for us in October. And I remember that Clara was there, and I was just able to see Clara when I was in Brussels with the TAM students in June. And that's also making me think one of the questions I had for you all was, to talk about, if you would talk about the contact you've had with other grads. We talked about it in the context of Philip's internship, and then also, the friendships you made when you were in TAM and to what extent you keep up with some of those people from your cohort. What about you, Abby? Because I know you deferred and you spent some good time researching TAM and interacting with grads.
Yeah, so I the TAM grad network is phenomenal. Every single person I reached out to gave me an hour or more of their time. I've tried my best to pay it forward. And actually, I was just talking to Cassandra last week. And anyone who wants to chat with me after this, please feel free. It's kind of like you talk to a million people when you're trying to figure out what job you want and what grad school you want. And so then you end up talking to a million people who are trying to make those same decisions. For me, TAM was really valuable in terms of, making lifelong friends. My friend Julie and I just saw each other again for my 30th birthday this summer. She's working for the Swedish Migration Agency in Växjö, which is spelled Vaxjo, Philip. That's crazy. I can never remember how to pronounce it. But she and I have stayed friends and visited each other 3 times, which is wild given that we live across the Atlantic from each other. So I would really recommend, reaching out to anybody from TAM to try and find out more about whether this is the right fit for you. The combination of having really warm and friendly grads, as well as a very affordable program that got me to get abroad a lot or have connections to people that were abroad, was very valuable for me.
Mario, Philip, do you want to add anything about the friendships, the alumni network?
I agree a lot with what Abigail said. Sadly, like the classmates of UNC, I only got to see, but it was a great thing. And even though we barely had met each other, we connected very well. And so it's like a tight knit group, even though I barely ever saw them. So
Yeah.
I feel like that's a lot of what TAM is like. And the grads I've been talking to have been very open to like spend an hour, as Abigail said. And we're here if you guys want to chat sometime too.
Thank you.
For me, because I'm on the West Coast, so I feel sometimes a little disconnected. And I think this is generally the case out of a lot of kind of international transatlantic stuff is in the East Coast. So like, DC, the UN institutions. So I've kind of just been doing my own thing out here in the West Coast. But yeah, I would like to hopefully in the future try and pursue more career-based opportunities, more related to international issues in the East Coast. That's always been something that has been on my mind. And yeah, in terms of friendships, again, it's been a little hard because the limitation of traveling. So there's only so much keeping up you can do over like Facebook. But I did stay really good friends with a friend from Germany, Philip. When we finished the first semester at UNC, did a road trip from UNC back to California. So it's kind of funny, like traveling. I had like a really small car, so you see like this Mexican kid and this tall German guy packed in the car with a bunch of stuff. And sometimes I remember driving through Georgia, like the highway patrol would just follow us for like 10 minutes. Like it was like, yeah, such a sight.
Yeah.
And it was cool. I made really good friendships, and so I'm hoping like next year to like reconnect with a lot of folks. Hopefully.
Maybe come to one of our DC parties.
Yeah.
All right. Now, before I forget, Philip, please tell us your favorite class, and then we will open it up for questions from the group.
So heading into TAM, I wasn't a big fan of like numbers and all of that, but so I was kind of nervous about the statistics classes, but somehow they kind of turned out to be some of my favorite ones because I learned a lot, and some of the knowledge I got from those classes I'm able to like apply now in politics, and helps me to like find focus areas and other things like that. So that was the most useful class for me, and that's kind of what made it fun. And I also did my thesis with statistics, so that helped me a lot too.
Excellent, thank you. Do you all have questions for our grads? I kind of tantalized you with Brett's potential story. He's working at Center now and was in Berlin and also had DAD funding. So please, just graduated in May. Also, fair game to ask him a question. Grads, do you have any questions for us? You have both undergrads and incoming TAM students in your audience.
Maybe someone should tell us what part of TAM they're the most nervous about.
Good one. Yeah, we have Ola, Kenzie. Oh, we lost the other two. Evan, we have Evan. No, we have three. What are you most nervous about? And Leah, sorry, didn't see you up in the corner there. Be curious to know if any of the panelists have any general advice on how to make the most of the TAM program as an incoming student. It's an excellent question.
I can start. I think like I never went to UNC, so I would first off say like try to socialize with your classmates and get to know each other. But like more professionally, I would advise you to try to find some type of internship at any point through your TAM experience, because it helps a lot applying for jobs. And also like if you have contacts from like networking and stuff like that, don't be afraid to reach out and see if they are willing to have a coffee or just a chat on Zoom or somehow. And that's my first advice.
I think for me, it would be plan ahead. I think it's TAM could be a very logistical experience. So, planning like a move to another state, to another country, you definitely need to plan ahead for like visas, housing, travel, things like that. Also in the academic aspect as well. Like for example, planning for internships, you really have to apply like ahead. For example, like when I applied for UNDP, I had applied like in February, March, like really early in the year. And I didn't hear back like 6-7 months later. And I thought I hadn't gotten anything at all. And I had already planned to like do an internship in Greece. And then last minute, I was informed. So sometimes that's how it goes with these kind of international internships, because they're so competitive, they move a little slower. And then also for like scholarships, like for example, DAD, I had to apply kind of like really early on in my first semester, and I was like, well, like how? Like I'm just barely starting my graduate experience. Like I have nothing to show for it. But it's those things where you have to do it, because then like a year and a half later, you have funding, to like live in the country and be like pretty relaxed about it. So yeah, it's like a very logistical experience. So yeah, you just have to like be on top of things. And but overall, it's like a great experience. Make the most of your time in the different locations that you're at.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And actually, this year, there was a lot of anxiety about the internships, even the non-international ones, just the domestic ones came along late. And a lot of them, the students are doing wonderful internships this summer, but they had to wait until April, even May, to hear about them. So you're right, plan ahead and kind of be persistent and patient, I think. I know you had even more paperwork to deal with, Mario, because going overseas always necessitated extra for you, but you hung in there, you got it done. Abby, what would you say? Words of wisdom?
I would say, at least for me, one of the most challenging parts was my thesis, because I was doing a dual degree with Gothenburg and UNC, and European universities don't always write their theses exactly like American universities do. And that was my first time writing a thesis. I do think, it's not productive to go into it really scared of it and thinking, oh my God, how am I going to write this huge paper? It's just a paper. It's a paper like any other paper. But, especially, I was kind of trying to do other things, and looking back, I couldn't have not interned during that time. You know, it was so helpful for me in finding a job. And I ended up being lucky enough to get the summer grant to go to Europe and do research on the far right, but I kind of overestimated my ability to do a lot. And on top of that, you know, I didn't really kind of understand how to map the whole process out as a whole and who I needed to talk to and how much input I needed to get from what person. And I compared it to my friend I mentioned before, Julia, who had gone to GU for her undergrad. You know, she just knew exactly what to do from the beginning. She's like, okay, I'm going to get this advisor and he's going to help me for this amount of time. And like, he needs to know this stuff. And then like my other advisor needs to know this stuff. And I just had no idea how to do it. So I would say really don't underestimate how difficult it is to submit one paper to two schools that want very different things out of that one paper. Like at the end, it was like this like huge thing. Like I don't even feel good about like what the argument was because it was like I stuffed so much into it that both sides wanted that like it didn't even really make sense, right? Like I just was like, oh, I hate this. I don't ever want to read it again. But you know, again, school is not life. No one will ever care about my thesis. No one will ever read it. So don't stress too hard.
Other questions on your mind? I'm interested to hear from the panelists what you think is the point of studying the transatlantic relationship today.
The war in Ukraine is especially important to have like this type of cooperation so that we don't get further apart and that we have a united front, I would say. So I'm very interested in like national security and security and things like that. So I would say that's a big thing, and I would hope that some type of like investment or trade agreement could possibly happen between the EU and the US in the future. TTIP didn't work, but hopefully, I personally hope that something will come out in the future because it would benefit both Europe and the US.
Sorry, Abby.
No, you got.
I saw your mic turn off. Well, I think for me, it's just Europe is so broad and diverse, and my experience in the European Union helped me see how they address like certain topics. And for me, specifically for migration, it was interesting to see their approach and then compare it to the US. So I think in that aspect, there's so many issues that both sides kind of deal with. And so it's interesting to see how they address it and then getting ideas from each other to solve, you know, very similar issues. For example, when I was at the European Parliament, I went to an event on European refugee integration in the EU, and they invited a panelist, Harvard professor, who was basically talking about the undocumented experience of youth in Los Angeles and how, you know, they could use lessons from that experience to assimilate like young refugees and asylum seekers. And I was like, wow, like that was my experience. I grew up undocumented in LA. So then to see how, you know, they invited someone who's an expert on that and to talk about like how you can use that experience to shape policy in the EU was kind of like a full circle kind of thing. I felt like my TAM experience came full circle at that moment. So yeah, I think it's just you can learn so much from Europe.
I think and my answer is not as relevant as an American, but you know, when I went to this event at the German Marshall Fund, which is a big transatlantic focused think tank in DC, they throw a big conference in Brussels every year. And they had a guy come in, and I'm forgetting what his name. I think his name is like Timothy Ashton or Timothy Garden Ash, actually. And he had written a lot about the European Union. And one thing he said, he brought in a group of younger fellows from all across Europe to speak to them. And he said, people don't think about it this way, but the European Union is actually first and foremost the greatest peace project that's ever been accomplished. If you think about the hundreds of thousands of years of war that Europe has been engaged in and the level of success, that it's had. And I, as someone who's interested in conflict, that really just kind of changed my perspective on Europe. I'd always been interested. I studied abroad in Rome 10 years ago. Now I'm back again because I love Italy, but so I was in a soft spot for Europe. But I think that this is just completely my personal opinion. As a world power in a increasingly multipolar world, Europe has the opportunity to continue to be a bastion for human rights, for climate protection, in a space where that's not necessarily going to be able to gain as much traction as it could a couple of years ago. And that's a negative take maybe, but I think that increased European American cooperation on those issues will enable Europe, especially, to be able to kind of lead in ways and to hold the line. And so for me, not even just because of Ukraine, but I remember doing my summer research project on the far right last summer, and we're seeing huge upticks in the far right. My thesis was also focused on the far right in Europe, but if you look at the bloc as a whole, Europe is still doing more than the US right now to protect climate, to safeguard human rights, to create a decent standard of living. And so it's been really fascinating to me, at least, to kind of to strengthen that relationship, because the reason that I got interested in conflict in the first place was during the conflict in Yugoslavia and wondering who was going to intervene, and if somebody needed to intervene, right, which is a big question. And if not the US, who, right? And Europe wasn't able to at that point, but like at this point, if not the US, who, maybe Europe, and maybe Europe and the US together, right? And so seeing how that relationship evolves over the next 10 to 20, 30 years, I think it'll be really fascinating as we come up against these huge global problems.
Thank you. So we also have some questions in the chat. Mackenzie is asking, what was it like to work with your thesis advisor or advisors? Any tips for that working relationship? And Emily is asking, how did you choose your topic for your thesis? Excellent questions.
Can go very briefly. I think my thesis advisor was she was great, Professor Mathis in Germany, and I think for your thesis overall, don't psych yourself out. Take it step by step, component by component, and I think your thesis advisors are really there to help you. And I think for choosing an advisor, I feel like you just need to choose someone that you feel is going to give you the best support possible, and maybe someone who has experience in the topic that you're researching. And choosing your topic, I feel like, comes from the experience that you have, because sometimes you could be really focused on one issue, and then maybe you do like an internship halfway through the program, and then you become focused on another issue. So I would say, like, leading up to your thesis is trying to explore different experiences, different courses, because then maybe you might find something that you find interesting and fascinating, which could be something you weren't interested about before. And yeah, it's a process. It's a long process, but don't psych yourself out, because then you kind of get stuck, and that's detrimental. So. And like Abby said, it's like a paper at the end of the day. So you just need to write anything, and then you can always go back, draft it, revise it, condense it, but just write.
Really quick, working with thesis advisor, I would say choose the person that you like the most. I chose the person that I liked the most, and it was great for me because that person will really go above and beyond for you. And you need that, especially if your life, if anything happens in your own personal life at that time that gets hard, you're going to need someone who's going to really, really help you out. It was a little bit trickier picking somebody at a university that I'd never physically been to. You guys will have an easier, go of it there. But I would say someone who really understands how to write a thesis for a university that is less familiar to you, whether you're coming from the US side or the European side, is key, and making sure that that person is on deadline and understands like start to finish how to do it, and maybe does it a lot for students. So someone that's like frequently worked with TAM students and knows what to expect. That's, if I could do it again, that's what I would do. And then in terms of picking your topic, pick something you're going to be fascinated about. You can work on it and talk about it nonstop for 6 months, but don't pick something that's so huge that you end up writing all this beautiful content about it for like months and months, and then all you use like this, not, the right scope. I had like literally 20 pages of thesis that I didn't even use. Because I was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to like talk about the far right, like, political parties and talk about media? And that like was what I was even more interested in. But then it was easier to measure political parties, and I found like a scale that would work, and like, you know what I mean? Like it becomes something where it's like, if you can find the right tools to do it, it's easier. Oh, there's more background research here, right? So find something interesting, but also find something that's a lot of like support for it.
Good advice. Now, Abby, we know you may have to sign off at the hour mark, so thank you if you do have to go. Philip, what do you think about the thesis?
I basically agree with everything that Mario and Abigail said. I would say more about like choosing the topic for me. I kind of had a topic in mind at the start of what I wanted to do, or like in the first semester somehow. And then I started like looking up articles and trying to write papers for different classes that were kind of focused on that topic. And then once I actually wrote my thesis, I had read a lot of the articles, made notes and everything. So I just used that for my thesis, and that helped me a lot. But some people don't know until like once you actually have to turn in for Gothenburg exam, for example, you have to turn in something third week or something, like a short brief of what you wanted to do. And some people just decided the last week, and that's okay too. Then just start reading and do whatever you are interested in, basically.
Super. Such good advice. Are there any other questions on your minds for Philip or Mario? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining. Mario, Philip, thank you so much for sharing your stories and taking questions. Yay, TAM. We're very proud of you. It is
Can
cool.
I offer one last piece of advice?
Yes.
Make friends with Sarah.
I am everyone's friend, a friend to all.
She's really supportive and she's really great.
Thank you.
I agree.
You.
Happy Friday, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.